In this video, we will show you how to replace your front window regulator. Let's get started. Let's start removing our master window switch from the door panel. To remove this, we'll use a plastic trim tool. Carefully get underneath this forward area, right in the center. There's going to be a locking clip. Once you get in between there, gently press it and lift this up. Now from underneath this area, we're going to start dislodging all three of our electrical connectors. This will be easiest using a small pocket screwdriver. For this one, we're going to carefully get right in the center, gently press on this area, and lift this up and off. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, take a peek. If you see any funny colors, that's considered corrosion, and that would need to be dealt with. This looks fine, so I'll continue. This one has a locking clip in the center as well. Quick inspection. Move along. Just pop this off of here. Let's continue on by removing this armrest. Under this, you're going to find that you have three locking clips. We'll use a plastic trim tool, carefully get under this area and gently start prying it up. There we are. You can see the clips. Behind that area, you're going to find one 10mm headed mounting bolt. Remove it. Now let's move along to this area. We'll gently remove it by either using a pocket screwdriver or a pick. Get in between this area and gently pry. Once it starts coming apart, just go ahead and pull it right out of there. Let's continue on to the two bolts that are located behind that area. We'll use a 10mm and a magnet to remove them. There they are. Continue on straight underneath that. You're going to find your inside door handle. Behind that door handle, you're going to find a small rectangular trap door. Use a small screwdriver or pick. Go ahead and pop that door out of place. Once you have that out of there, continue on to removing the hidden 10mm headed bolt. There's that. Now that that's off of there, we're going to continue on by removing this panel. Underneath that panel, you'll find one more 10mm headed bolt right over here. At this point, we have all of our mounting hardware off of the door panel. We're going to start separating the door panel from the door itself using a plastic trim tool. Before you start taking it off, keep in mind there is still two cables located behind this. One of them leads to the door handle area. The other one's going to make its way all the way over here to the door lock area. So once you pop this off, we're going to start dealing with those. Just make your way along one corner of this panel and start pulling it off, being extremely careful for any pinch points. Once you have the bottom pulled off, carefully lift it up. Now we can turn this so we can gain access to our two cables. Let's start by removing the door handle cable. That's the shorter cable. Go ahead and grab onto that and pull it away from the door panel. It's going to dislodge from this area. Once you have it dislodged, we'll continue on to removing the actual cable area from inside the handle. Give it a quick inspection. We'll set that aside and do the same thing for the door lock. Remove the door panel. Now that we have the door panel out of the way, the next thing that you would want to do would be to remove the vapor barrier from this area. It's essentially going to look like a piece of plastic that covers it, and it's held in place with a whole bunch of black butyl tape. Ours is missing, so I have nothing to show you, but essentially just go ahead and carefully peel that back and out of the way. Once you have the vapor barrier out of the way, you should have a clear view of part of the window regulator. It has two rods that come straight up through like this, behind this area. Now with that said, the next thing that you want to do is make sure you have the window down to a position that you can gain access to your two 10mm headed mounting bolts. You'll have one on the rearward side here, and then another one on the forward side. This would be the area that you want to gain access. For ours, the window regulator is actually damaged. The window is stuck in this position, but typically you want to be able to gain access right along here. Before we start taking out the mounting bolts, make sure you have something handy, such as maybe tape or suction cups, to be able to hold the window in the upright position once we have it broken free from the window regulator. Let's continue on by removing our two 10mm headed bolts. Keep in mind, these are what holds the window to the regulator, and you don't want the window to potentially fall down and hurt you. Now that I have both of those mounting bolts out of there, I'm going to continue on by carefully lifting the window up to the fully upright position. And then you want to make sure you hold it in place with something. Like I said, suction cups making their way up and over, or even some tape. Whatever you do, be as safe as possible. Once you're sure the window is safely secured, continue on down to this area. This is the electrical harness for the window motor. You want to press on this little tab and gently separate it. Now we're going to start removing this from the door. Looking along the back side of it, you're going to find that it has a plastic clip that you can use some pliers, gently squeeze the two ears together, and remove this from the door. There's those two ears that I showed you I grabbed onto. Now let's continue on with a 10mm headed socket. We're going to remove these three bolts. Let's continue on down along the bottom. You're going to find two 10mm headed bolts. Now for our last two 10mm headed bolts, we're only going to loosen them enough that we can slide them up and out of their channels. Now we can reach inside this area. I'm going to lift up on this, and you're going to watch the bolt go up into this larger hole, and then I'm going to push it back into the door a little bit. We'll do the same on the other side. Now we can remove the window regulator from the door. There it is, friends. Now that we have the window regulator assembly with the motor out of the vehicle, let's continue on removing the motor from the regulator. Now to do that, I'm going to flip it over. Looking at the far side, you'll find that you have three 8mm headed bolts that hold it to the regulator. Let's go ahead and remove all three. Now we'll turn this back over. Now that we've fully removed our screws, let's carefully remove the motor from the window regulator base. To do that, I'll hold onto the base, wiggle the motor around, and carefully lift it up and out of position. Before we go ahead and recycle our window regulator, let's make sure that we remove those top mounting bolts. Now we can install our window motor on the window regulator. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that you have the square shaft area lined up perfectly with the square shaft hole on the window regulator. While we're doing that, you also want to pay attention to this. You have a nice carve out. That's going to be for where this area of the window motor goes into. Let's put this into place, sliding the shaft directly into its square hole. The next thing we want to do is start lining up our mounting bolt holes. So I'll turn it over. We'll get those three lined up, start them in, snug them up. Now that we have the motor fully installed, let's also turn the window regulator over. We're going to want to put in our top bolts. The way that you can tell which area is the top is by looking at the area that holds the window in place. Each of these ears should have a little carve out along the top of it. So with that said, we'll take each of those 2 top bolts and put them in just a couple threads. You want to make sure you leave them nice and loose. Let's get over to the vehicle. Now we can put the window regulator assembly into the door. When you do this, you just want to carefully compress it so it's as small as possible. Slide it in here, and then we'll line up those 2 alignment bolts along the top. Let's start with the forward one. I'm going to try to get this lined up. We'll have the bolt come right on through. Rest that in place and do the same to the other. Now let's start in our 2 lower bolts as well. We're only going to leave these loose. We'll tighten them in a minute. Now before you tighten any of those bolts, let's move along to the motor. Make sure you have the wiring coming out this area. Next, we'll line up our 3 mounting bolt holes for the window motor and start in those mounting bolts as well. Now that we have all of our mounting bolts started and we're sure that the wiring is out and safe, let's continue on by snugging up all 7 of our mounting bolts. Start with the motor. Make sure they're all nice and tight. Now we can connect our electrical connector. We'll listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure it's secure, and then secure it to the door. All right, we're at the point that we're going to carefully start bringing the window down till it connects into the window regulator. We'll hold pressure on that window, making sure that it cannot fall down. Just reach in here, slide it forward a little bit. Do the same on the other side as we bring it down into place. Once you bring the window down, you need to double check its alignment. Looking at this red area, you can tell it has an area that protrudes out and it fits into this groove. Once you have that in the groove, your mounting bolt hole should line up perfectly. Double check to make sure both look the same, start in both of those bolts, and then snug them up. Okay, bottomed out right there. Just make sure it's nice and tight. Do the same to the other. Now the next thing we want to do before we continue putting everything back together is test the window functionality. We want to make sure that it goes up and down without any restriction. Now with that said, let's take that window switch. Have a look from the back side. We're going to connect 2 of our connectors. This one right here and right there. You do not need to reconnect the mirror switch for this. We'll take the larger connector and put it on the back side. Listen for a click. Continue on to the small connector. Now let's put the key in the on position. The vehicle does not have to be running for this. Now we're going to carefully make the window go up and down and make sure it's not binding in any way. Assuming it functions properly, go ahead and turn off the key power and remove the switch. Okay, the next thing that you would want to do would be to put back on the weather barrier that goes across here. As I told you prior, this was already removed from our application, so I have nothing to show you for this. But all you want to do is put it back in the original position as where you had removed it. Once you've done that, we're going to continue on to both of our cables. Let's take that door panel and hold it up like this. We'll take the longer cable and put it into the locking mechanism back here. Slides right into that hole. Now I'm going to swing this area where you can see the bevel and lock it into the door panel itself. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure it's secure. Now let's continue on to the cable that leads to the door handle. You can see at the end of the cable it has this little round ball. We're going to slide it right into the placement on the handle itself and then bring it this way. Now the same as the door lock one, you've got that little area here that needs to lock into the door panel. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure it's completely secure. Now let's bring the door panel over here. I'm going to grab the wiring coming through this top slot. We'll pull it up and through. Take the door panel and bring it up nice and high. You'll notice along this area of the door panel there's a ridge, and along here on the door there's an area for it to fit into. Let's lift it up nice and high, set it down into there. Holding the wires up so they're not inside the door, we can continue on by looking along the side. What we're paying attention to is the little push tabs that are located in the panel and the holes that are in the door for them to line up with. Just get it so they're lined up and then give it a loving bonk to drive them all in, all the way around the door panel. Once you're sure all those push clips are installed, we're going to start putting in our mounting bolts. Let's start with the one that's directly underneath the handle here. You remember that we had 2 mounting screws in that area. We're going to put in the one that's on the left. Go ahead and put it in, snug it up. Once that's in there, continue on with this panel. You can see you have your little locking clips making their way around. We'll put it in place and place it in there. Once it's there, continue on with your 10mm headed bolt and then put on your little trap door. Now for this little trap door, you want to pay attention to the back side. You'll find it has one large locking ear and a smaller one. The area with the large ear should be on the left side. Now let's continue up here. Once you have that bolt in there, continue on with the armrest. Line up all 3 of your mounting points with the corresponding holes in the door panel. Once it's lined up, press it in. Now let's continue on to the 2 bolts that hold the grab handle. Put that in my socket. We'll start it in here. Let's put our cover on. All right, let's get this installed. Press it in and listen for a click. Continue on down the line. Once you have that in place, continue on by putting the rear in first and then sliding it down towards the front to lock it in position. Now that we have the door panel back on, we need to make sure that we test the inside door handle to make sure it's hooked up correctly. To do that, we're going to come right over here to the door latch. Use a screwdriver and come right inside this area. I'm going to pull it towards me. Now at this point, the latch thinks that the striker is in the closed position. The door's shut. Now while I'm holding pressure, forcing it away, I'm going to come over here and try to pull on the inside door handle. Assuming it releases, everything should be hooked up fine. At that point, you can move along. Okay friends, at this point, we've got the door panel back together. Go ahead and put the key in the on position and test the window functionality one last time. It works perfectly. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.